Rob Weinhold joins us. He's a crisis leadership expert and CEO of the Fallston Group. He's also the author of the book, The Art of Crisis Leadership. New polls are out about this cancel culture. A lot of people denied that it even existed. Now, over 60% of Americans believe it is a threat to freedom. What is this all about? Rob, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here. How are you?
I am doing fine, Rob. Rob, so when we think about this cancel culture, we hear about, Dr. Seuss is in the news, Harry Potter, Mr. Potato Head, books on Amazon, the list goes on and on with any number of businesses, any number of professors on college campuses. What is this really about, and where does it end?
Well, I think what you're talking about is really a modern-day form of ostracism in which someone or an organization is thrust out of social, cultural, or professional circles, whether it be online, social media, or in person, for alleged bad behavior, according to those who are attempting to cancel or ostracize someone. And I say to folks, look, the speed of information now is faster than it's ever been before, and so are its verdicts. In other words, the court of public opinion is alive and well, I think. But what's different than the court of law is the court of public opinion is judging not only current events, but history within modern real-time contextual realms. And so consumers now feel empowered more than they ever have before because of social media and other digital platforms, and just not to criticize and attack specific brands, but to generally share their opinions on brands, issues, events, individuals. And one thing is certain, customers will vote with their feet, their wallet, and their voice. And I firmly believe that organizations must adapt to today's environment.
Now, this cancel culture, though, takes many shapes and many forms, right?
Absolutely, many shapes and many forms. But I think what people are used to now because of social media is that's where the conversation is occurring. And when the conversation occurs on digital platforms and social media, then transcends to traditional media. And whether we're talking about histories or politics or, when I say histories, I'm talking about statues, landmarks, people, books, social justice, workplace culture, sports, sexual harassment issues. I mean, the Washington football team now, Dan Snyder, is under fire for quote-unquote canceling the first ladies of football. There's an NFL investigation underway regarding the mistreatment of some of their cheerleaders in the past. And so, I would say that no one is immune these days, and but this isn't new. And I think a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, this is new. And I would say that economic boycotting, strikes, protests, just a different evolution of what canceling actually is because of the platforms where the conversation is occurring.
There's I guess, for lack of a better term, I'll call it a creep, where this is creeping across any number of activities in our country. Recently, I read an article in Psychology Today, and it occurred to me, and they made an observation, and I guess I missed it. A lot of folks are engaged in this kind of under the theory that they're trying to hold people accountable. But as you look at a lot of this, there's no rhyme or reason to this accountability standard that they're talking about. I mean, this is just out-and-out cancellation, right?
Well, accountability may be some people's motivation, but we really don't know what's motivating everyone. Everyone seems to look through a little bit of a different lens. But one thing is for certain, and that is anyone with an internet connection and a recording device can wreak havoc on your brand. And I would say the difference today is the velocity, the intensity, and potentially even the longevity of an issue which may be in the middle of the court of public opinion for judgment. I always use the hurricane metaphor. Some are Category 1s. They come by and boom, they go through, and within 12 to 24 hours, the sun's back out. Others, maybe a heavier sense of downfall, so to speak, and high winds, and they stick around for a little while. And I think we really, really need to be careful because, corporate social responsibility is alive and well. And leaders are expected to have a voice. But when you're the subject of boycotting or consumer protesting, there's an adage that we use in our business, whether we're working with large public companies all the way down to small restaurateurs and individuals, and that is if you don't tell your story, someone else will. And when someone else tells your story, it certainly won't be the story you want told. So I believe it's very important for organizations, or people for that matter, to articulate their position, explain why they've chosen to adopt that position, and then go ahead and make sure that they are able to inform the audience about what their goals or plans are now and in the future, whether there's a call to action involved or not. And if at the end of that process, right, more times I would say the right message at the right time on the right platform to the right audience for the right reasons will right the ship. But those who choose to not align with you, even after the explanation, at least there's a common understanding as to why.
Yeah. A lot of folks, I think, make the mistake of just get offline, get off social media, just kind of hunker down, and this too shall pass. Sometimes that's true, but in today's times, as you said, with this digital media, that's not necessarily true.
Well, it's not true, and it's interesting because there's no such thing as a local news story anymore. It's on the internet for the world to see, and so whether you're the Hyatt or Publix or Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, in dealing with some of the political decisions or some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that many have had to deal with, and rightly so, or workplace culture, look at Ellen DeGeneres, and now Coca-Cola is thrust into the court of public opinion in and around its DEI training. And so we can go on and on and on about the number of people who are being judged in the court of public opinion. All you have to do is look a little bit to the Northeast and Governor Cuomo, who, just a short time ago was being praised for his handling of the pandemic and winning awards and writing a book and so on and so forth, is now facing a tremendous amount of public scrutiny, which may lead to his demise. And so the point I'm making is that no one is exempt, and I think that now people have a voice that is stronger and more available than ever before in the history of this country or the world.
And the perpetrator of this cancel culture takes many shapes and forms as well, because now you also have U.S. corporations that have involved themselves in the cancel culture, where they're punishing folks for their opinion and not doing business with them, eliminating them from any number of opportunities to engage in commerce with their company, and so forth.
Yeah, I brought up the Washington football team earlier. It's an example of that, I believe. And then the research that you pointed out, about 64% of respondents saying that they thought the cancel culture posed a threat to freedom, and 36, obviously, percent said that it was not. But the bottom line is that everyone has a latitude to make decisions, whether you're a consumer, whether you are an executive in a corporation. And what we advise our clients is to now more than ever be as predictive as you can. There's a downstream effect to every single decision that's being made, and whether it's your internal audience or your customer base or any other micro community that depends on you, what is always at stake is marketplace trust. And you must pay attention to that, because I always say that reputation leads to trust, and trust leads to valuation, and not all currency is financial.
Yeah, that is so true. A lot of folks also believe that this is just a kind of a woke left, issue, challenge, or otherwise. That's not necessarily true either. In fact, in one of the articles I read, they point out about Netflix film Cuties, where it seems as though bipartisan, a lot of different ideologies came together and really went after that particular film production.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have an opinion about whether this breaks down between Republicans and Democrats and independent. I mean, frankly, in that poll you're referring to out of Harvard, 80% of the Republicans felt like cancel culture was a threat, and 48% of Democrats felt it was a threat. But I think it doesn't matter, candidly. And what I always say, if you're under fire and you're being pressured to make a certain decision in one way, shape, or form, slow down the process. The velocity of news and the velocity of judgment at times outpaces your ability to make informed decisions. The last thing you want to do is go out and play whack-a-mole trying to quiet loud voices and inadvertently make the wrong decision. So in my view, process is as important as outcome, and you need to be thoughtful in your approach, because you must be ready to meet the moment, because the decisions you make today will be judged by many for years to come.
So your recommendation as both individuals, corporations, or otherwise is to have a candid conversation with oneself or their organization about when is it coming for me. It's almost not a question of if, it's a question of when. Because now the accountability strain runs from employee to employers about personal ideologies in many cases.
Well, you're exactly right. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And let me share with something very quickly, and it's something I call the 15-70-15 paradigm. When something happens that is of consequence, 15% of the people who know and align with your brand, you could probably go up and punch them square in the nose, and it would be the best punch in the nose they've ever received. The other 15%, use whatever metaphorical example you want. You hand them a winning lottery ticket or a bar of gold, they will never, ever be on your side, and they'll always be a detractor. But really what you're fighting for is that 70% in between, that when they hear about a particular issue, they take a step back, their eyebrow goes up, and they go, I want to wait and see how this organization or this particular leader handles this issue of adversity or crisis, and then will render judgment. And many leaders, I think that there is a tendency to go ahead very, very quickly respond to the loudest voices in the room because there's a lot of marketplace momentum. But at the end of the day, they often do not make the proper decisions because they have not, one, slowed down the process, two, thoughtfully thought through all of the different downstream effects of their decision-making, and they're catering to a smaller group of people versus what is beneficial for the whole.
Two other points. This environment or landscape that's a downstream of this cancel culture, it seems to me is not very receptive of contrary thought.
I mean, it's a great point. Again, I think it goes back to that example I just talked about in terms of the paradigm. There are some people who it doesn't matter what you say, they are never going to agree with you. But I think the trick in any crisis situation is to identify who your ambassadors, your detractors, and who the influencers are within the various micro communities that you care about. And you have to realize that you're not going to bring everyone from negative to neutral or neutral to positive. You have to make the right decisions for the right reasons based on your North Star, and your North Star could be the mission and vision of your organization or something else that's very important to you. But again, I tell everybody you need to look in the mirror and make sure that you made the right decisions, and the chips will fall where they may.
It also seems to me that the tools in and around emotional intelligence are probably more important now in dealing with the cancel culture than at any other time in the history of this country.
There's two things I tell people. I've worked with a lot of people and organizations in crisis over many years, and there's two things that people do very quickly that tells me that they are going to cycle through crisis the quickest and probably the most efficiently. Number one is, and it sounds obvious, they put their hand up and they admit they're in crisis. And for whatever reason, leaders sometimes have a hard time doing that. It could be they have an ego, or they're embarrassed, or they think tomorrow will be a better day. And as we all know, hope is not a strategy. The second thing they do is they reach out to their trusted network of advisors. When you're in the bullseye and the lights and the camera are on, I don't care how good you are at your craft or how intelligent you happen to be in many different settings, it is a different ballgame. And you must rely on those trusted advisors to give you perspective that you simply don't have. When people hire our firm, they want us to do two things for them. They want us to help them maintain control and weather the storm. And that's really what people want at the end of the day. And that's what we're there to do, and that is to help people during life's most critical times.
Especially, those corporations and companies that have good, solid core principles, but good, solid core principles don't always remedy the recklessness of individuals that work within that organization, right?
Tiger, Toyota, Mother Stewart, Goldman Sachs, Penn State, BP, Ray Rice, the NFL, United Airlines, Uber, Lance Armstrong, Ellen DeGeneres. I mean, I could go on and on and on and talk about all.
We have two more. We have 2 more hours, Rob.
Yeah, all these great brands that have found themselves in trouble, and some recover, and some, frankly, they don't. And so I tell folks this: look, police chiefs are hired to reduce crime and improve the quality of life. Coaches are hired to win games. Chief executives are hired to go ahead and increase earnings per share or valuation in some way, shape, or form, depending on how it's defined. whatever you're hired or elected or appointed to do, you have to make sure that the noise of crisis doesn't throw you out of your lane and prevent you from achieving your results or desired outcomes, because that's what you're going to be judged on. Are you able to deliver or not from a leadership perspective? And so all of these distractions have a way of consuming leaders, and the next thing you know, the calendar pages keep turning, and at the end of the year or the end of the term, they have not accomplished their goals and they have failed. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to leaders is, look, make sure you hit your marks. No matter what happens, identify your plan, identify your measurable results, and make sure you hit them, because all of a sudden, you'll make a believer out of a lot of people, and people will line up behind you if you're able to deliver results, whatever they happen to be or however they are defined.
Yeah, and there is exigency to that, because I think it is a significant challenge. It's really tough to align everything that you do with inside your corporate arena, so to speak, to modern sensibilities. Because modern sensibilities are fickle and they're changing quick.
There's so many nuances to this game, and you have to be able to adapt. But I think really strong leaders, they coach, they communicate, they motivate, they empower, and they hold people accountable. And if you're able to do those 5 things within the marketplace that you operate in addition to adapting to society, to cultural norms, to what your customers want from you. And you have to remember, there are micro communities which are incredibly important to you, and frankly, that you're charged with serving. And I always believe that you can never know your customer too well. And when we work with organizations, one of the first things we do is we want to go on a listening tour. We want to understand what's being said. We want to understand what the digital conversations are like, what's happening in the court of public opinion. What does your workforce think? What does your executive team think, independent of you being in the room? And so once we get a gauge on that, then all of a sudden you can make more informed decisions, even within a changing environment.
Yeah, because your initial inclination, having been a leader of an organization with over 1,700 employees in my previous life, is this isn't fair. Life's not fair. So you got to get past that notion. You got to get past that notion real quick. And don't sit around and sulk on it for long. Rob Weinhold, crisis leadership expert and CEO of the Fallston Group, and also the author of the book, The Art of Crisis Leadership. I have truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
I have as well, and my pleasure, and I hope you have a wonderful day.